This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, now everybody's paying attention. To say the very least, Danielle Smith, Alberta's premier, addressing Albertans, and let's be real, addressing the nation on Monday afternoon. We're talking to you on a Tuesday morning. Grateful to have you with us. It's Jespersen Hicks. In just a second, Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations Grand Chief Greg Desjarlais will join us. The number of Indigenous and First Nations leaders across the country chiming in on this trend in Alberta, this refanning of the flames, this separatist movement, so to speak, has been loud. Many First Nations leaders across the province and beyond, of course, with that reminder that treaties are at play here. They're calling this referendum talk reckless, and we'll get Grand Chief Desjarlais' position on that in just a moment. We'll be looking to our Real Talk live chat as well for response to this. The Premier essentially issuing a list of demands to Ottawa, to the new Mark Carney government, saying that unless Alberta gets exactly what it wants, which includes access to tidewater in all directions. Alberta wants access to 3 different coastlines to maximize the potential of its number one industry, of its oil and gas to global markets. Danielle Smith arguing that the past decade of Liberal rule has cost Albertans trillions of dollars and thousands of jobs, and says Albertans are sick and tired. But here's the rub. The Premier also telling her fellow Albertans that her Canada includes Alberta, that she doesn't support talk of a referendum. So what's the average person supposed to make of all this? We'll be jumping into this in this episode of the show, and want to give you a heads up as well. In a couple of episodes from now, the 8th of May, Alberta's 19th Premier, Danielle Smith, will be joining me in the Real Talk studio, taking my questions and yours about this message to the rest of the country. Let's officially kick this off with a reminder that this show is happening with the presenting sponsorship of Business Career College, and they've got an incredible opportunity right now, kind of one of these ones you've got to check out if you're a financial planner or offering professional financial advice. If you want to future-proof your career, you want to work for decades to come, you got to know that Gen Z millennials, a majority of them are at least intrigued by decentralized finance, and they've got questions about how cryptocurrency is changing how Canadians invest and how it might factor into their investments. You want to know what you're talking about, and that's where the Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation comes into the mix. The CDAA starts at the very beginning of Bitcoin and the blockchain, and then it gets you leveled up so you can provide steady advice that your clients expect. You can check it out online at businesscareercollege.com. That's the Certified Digital Asset Advisor. Make sure you use that promo code Ryan20, all one word, Ryan20, to knock 20% off the cost of your investment in that CDAA designation at businesscareercollege.com. So the implications of this yet to be seen. Danielle Smith has commissioned a panel, says she's putting a team together, going to get a sense of where Albertans stand on this, and there is the potential for referendum questions sometime in 2026. That's notable, by the way. She indicates that the referendum would not be placed on the municipal election ballots this fall. Might be cheaper, might be easier if you're going to do it that way, but that's not the point. Premier says they're going to need more time to figure out exactly what Albertans are looking for and what that question should look like if it's posed. But there's an alternative to that too. There's a passing lane, so to speak, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, to set the tone, in case you missed it, here's how Alberta Premier Danielle Smith opened her address to Albertans.
The world looks at us like we've lost our minds. We have the most abundant and accessible natural resources of any country on earth, and yet we landlock them, sell what we do produce to a single customer to the south of us, while enabling polluting dictatorships to eat our lunch. For Albertans, these attacks on our province by our own federal government have become unbearable. We have fought these attacks from Ottawa furiously and have won some important battles. But the lost opportunities, jobs, and futures of so many Albertans are costly and demoralizing. as are the growing number of Eastern politicians who choose to openly demonize and target Alberta for political gain. That is why a large majority of Albertans are so deeply frustrated with the results of last week's federal election. It's not that our preferred candidate and party lost. That happens in a democracy. It's that the same Liberal government with almost all the same ministers responsible for our nation's inflation, housing, crime, and budget crisis, and that oversaw the attack on our provincial economy for the past 10 years, have been returned to power. Alberta didn't start this fight, but rest assured we will finish it and come out of it stronger and more prosperous than ever.
So there's kind of a mixed tone in this, right? Like fighting words. You know, the rest of the world basically thinks that we're insane for continuing to tolerate you people. The rest of Canada, those of you that have interfered with Alberta's bold ambitions, and Alberta has had bold ambitions, by the way, and that's not always a bad thing. I want to be very clear. I've already been receiving messages from some folks that are saying, boy, we can't wait to hear where Real Talk is going to go with this. We can't wait to hear the real talk on exactly what's happening and what all of this means and what all of this is really all about. And on the flip side, we're getting messages from those of you that are questioning our patriotism, questioning our love for the province. Danielle Smith chimed in on that, by the way, as well, near the end of her 20-minute address on Monday. Let's be clear. This has nothing to do with hating Alberta or being anti-Alberta, as the oil and gas, those most bullish in that industry, would have you believe when voices speak out collectively about the value of a national front, about the relationship that Alberta has with Canada, and not in a bad way, right? So let's be clear about that. If you're not raw for Alberta and screw the rest of the nation, it doesn't make you a bad Albertan, and that's very important. So there's that kind of fighting tone out of the gates, and there's more of that to come, right? At the end, she says, we didn't pick this fight, we didn't start this fight, but we're going to finish it. And I know for a lot of people, there's probably some snickering from Victoria all the way out to Newfoundland, because people have seen Alberta picking fights again and again and again. But it's working for Danielle Smith. It's working really well, right? And so she's continuing to go to the well here. But here's where it gets kind of confusing, because folks are believing that by her saying this and by the United Conservative government loosening the rules, remember we talked about this a few episodes ago, Bill 54, kind of making it easier for citizens to trigger a referendum. The UCP says that this has been in the works for a really long time. They said that they learned a lesson when that citizen initiative down in Calgary, taking aim at Mayor Jody Gondek, right, trying to run her out of office. That was a bit of a wake-up call for everybody that maybe the landscape was a little bit too difficult for citizens to organize and trigger a referendum. In loaded language, you might call it undemocratic. And so the United Conservative government says that they've been working on this for a long time. They're going to take the requirements from 600,000 signatures, which is a lot, no matter where you live. But in a province of about 4.5 million, 600,000 is a lot. And by the way, 90 days to rally those signatures. Well, now they've dropped it down to 177,000. Not a joke, but a lot easier. And they're giving citizens more time, 120 days. So from 600 to 177,000, from 90 to 120 days. So the government's running this and rolling this out at the same time that the Mark Carney Liberals are winning the federal election. As a matter of fact, the bill tabled the very next morning. The timing, notable to anybody, right, with an iota of common sense. The government says, no, it has really nothing to do with that. It really just has to do with preserving democracy in the province. But when these two things are happening parallel, right, people talking about Alberta's relationship with Canada and Alberta's future in or outside of Canada, and the regulations, the rules, the laws around triggering a referendum are being loosened, well, people typically can put two and two together. And here's what Premier had to say about that.
Our government will not be putting a vote on separation from Canada on the referendum ballot. However, if there is a successful citizen-led referendum petition that is able to gather the requisite number of signatures requesting such a question to be put on a referendum, our government will respect the democratic process and include that question on the 2026 provincial referendum ballot as well. I also want to state unequivocally that as Premier, I'm entirely committed to protecting, upholding, and honoring the inherent rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Therefore, any citizen-initiated referendum question must not violate the constitutional rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and must uphold and honor Treaties 6, 7, and 8 should any referendum question ever pass. This is non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable, says the Premier. So on one hand, she says, if we're not essentially given a very strong mandate, this is not a guarantee. We're not guaranteed to put a question to referendum. We're not guaranteed to put a referendum in front of the people. But in kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of a way, if the people organize and ask for a referendum, asking that specific question, the question she says the government won't ask, will or should Alberta leave Canada? If, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, citizens are able to rally under these new laws, making it easier to trigger a referendum, then we will put the question on the ballot. The loaded question, the big question. People will talk about referendums and polling, and they'll often say, the artistry, and sometimes, that means the rub, is in the question, is in how it's phrased. And a lot of times these questions are worded or phrased intentionally to confuse people, to be obfuscated, to be hard to understand. People, ordinary, intelligent people that excel at their jobs and in their everyday lives are staring at these pieces of paper and going, what does yes mean and what does no mean? But we're talking about a serious and direct question. Do you support, or however it would be phrased, do you support Alberta as a sovereign nation? Do you support Alberta leaving Canada? Do you support Alberta becoming the 51st state? Smith says that if enough people want that question on the ballot, they'll put it on the ballot, but follows up with the obvious, that the treaties must be respected, that the treaties will not be ignored, and that this is non-negotiable. Well, yeah, and that's what a lot of critics of the idea around Alberta's separation have been arguing for quite some time. It's what's prompted the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations to issue a number of different news releases calling this a reckless referendum. As a matter of fact, just a short time ago, Grand Chief Greg Desjarlais released a statement that the Premier's promotion of the idea of a referendum on separation is not only reckless, it's a direct violation of the treaty relationship that exists between our nations and the Crown. Says Grand Chief Desjarlais, our treaties are internationally binding, solemn covenants, and cannot be broken by any province or political party. Treaty 6 First Nations Grand Chief Greg Desjarlais joining us live on this episode of Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us this morning. Where's your head at after the television address from Premier Danielle Smith?
Good morning, Ryan, and thank you for all that. I want to remain the cooler head. I think we, the First Nations of this great land, have always been kind and loving, and sometimes, our kindness has been taken advantage of, as we see what's happening here today.
So your take on the tone of the address. She says, and we'll play more from the Premier's address in just a moment. She says that her Canada includes Alberta. She says she does not support the idea of separation, but says that the government will allow for the democratic process of this referendum, and then issues that caveat about the treaties. Did that put your mind at ease at all, or did it further confuse you as you were watching, and where are you at with that?
Well, I think, I'm going to just say slightly confused, but our treaties, are sacred, like I said in that statement, and no referendum can overturn them. Like the province of Alberta, we're frustrated with the Canadian government too. And now it seems like the province has an idea how the First Nations feel against Canada, because we've been in this predicament ever since we decided we were going to share this great land, and things haven't been great for our people. We all know the history, and I think that it really stings, doesn't it?
Well said. You wonder if there's sort of a conversation to be had there with disgruntled Albertans. Is that something that you would see in a position of leadership here as an opportunity?
Well, currently we don't have any meetings scheduled with the premier and her ministers, but you know what? In the past, there's these relationship tables, and there's a talk about reconciliation, and it seems like those things are barely hanging on, or being thrown off the table, which is sad because you know what? We always have tried to be good partners with Alberta, and it's pretty hard to be First Nation in Alberta here today.
Can you take us into if you have, the ears of the province, if you have the ears of the nation, and you want to further dive into what you just said and provide some calls to action or some talking points, if this is a moment where we have the collective attention of people that maybe for the first time in a long time, or maybe for the first time ever, are paying more attention to or learning more about these treaty relationships, what do you think are some of the key things that we all need to keep in mind?
I think what is huge is not many people are familiar with the NRTA, the Natural Resource Transfer Act, and that was unilaterally done and without First Nations consultation. We have to remember there was a time First Nations couldn't even vote or leave the reserve. So how could we get legal representation at this time? We all know Alberta is rich in resources, revenue, and basically sends transfer payments across this country. So I think that's important, that the people need to get educated on that. Why Indigenous people, are so vocal is because, the mistreatment over the years, decades, centuries, and I think that that's huge. I think another one is when the government comes to you with a document and says, here, what do you think? And they give you a couple of days to look at this document. And a lot of these documents, there's no Indigenous inclusion. I think that's huge. And when you want to talk about building a bridge with First Nations, it comes down to respect. You have to respect our governments. And it seems like what's happening is they want to steamroll over us and set up this separation with or without us, and not listening to us. So we have our mandate, our position is to be vocal and to be heard.
Grand Chief Greg Desjarlais, our guest, if you're watching the Real Talk live stream powered by California Closets, there are legalities around this. I mean, that's something that can't be ignored. I mean, I think a lot of people, there's a lot of emotion that's fueling this conversation, to say the very least. I think a lot of people are very frustrated by the election results. A lot of people are pissed off by what they feel, is Ottawa attacking Alberta's energy industry, which may or may not directly affect them personally. But how do you think that a referendum on Alberta's constitutional relationship or constitutional future within or outside of Canada would impact the legal relationship between Alberta and Treaty 6 nations?
Well, first and foremost, I believe Danielle Smith needs to abandon that rhetoric of separation, and you know what? I think the governments, and even Canada, has to take responsibility for handcuffing themselves. We should have, our resources to Tidewater, and have other, partners in this energy industry. And you know what? They have to take responsibility. And I believe that, this referendum and the thresholds, how they're lowered, the timelines that are added in the favor of the province. You can see what is happening here, and how politics is played here.
The premier says that the referendum would stand up for Alberta. How do you reconcile that framing with the existing treaty relationship?
Well, again, the sacred treaties, and they were done. As long as the sun shines, the grass grows, the river flows. That's forever, and that's what I see here today. And I think that what they're trying to do here is undermine the First Nations people. Maybe we're in the way. Maybe they think we're in the way. And I believe, and you talked about legalities. I think, we're watching what's going on. and we're going to see what this bill is actually entails, and we're going to review it, but with caution. Of course, we were upset too, and we were up in arms. But I believe when you make that statement that the Treaty 6, 7, and 8, will be upheld, then I'm going to hold you to task.
How prepared are Treaty 6 First Nations? I know you say you'll approach it cautiously, but are you prepared to assert jurisdictional authority if Alberta attempts to override federal authority in areas that would affect First Nations?
Well, that's a short answer, and yes, we are willing to go that route if we have to, because for too long, and it shows in Section 35 with all our victories that might be the way to go.
So what steps would you take, or Treaty 6 nations take, I should say, to protect inherent and treaty rights?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to go and have a spiritual strategy, and this is going to be a new word to people because that covenant was sealed with a pipe, and many people don't know. So we're both treaty people, myself and your ancestors, and we forget that. So when we both touched our lips on that pipe under the Creator's eye, that's a binding agreement, natural law. And I think what we need to do is we need to remind the governments and the settlers and the visitors, the newcomers, and have our ability to interpret the treaty. How could an interpreter interpret that high language and sometimes there's no words in the Cree language for certain words that they were using, and you see on the treaty there's no such words?
Do you think that this referendum could undermine reconciliation efforts between the province and First Nations? Do you see that happening right now?
I see it happening, and I want to say to the chiefs out there, that the amount of work that they're putting in, they're speaking up for their nations is huge because we love our people. And the reconciliation, what is that word? It's not just a one day a year. It's every day. The governments, the governments, and I'm going to say it, the church systems have to own up to their wrongs in order for there to be healing. And then they try hide it from their curriculum. How is that reconciliation?
Grand Chief, this is, I think, obviously an opportunity. We're going to see this conversation. I'm already seeing it. I'm experiencing it in my own personal life. People that I care about that feel very differently about this issue. People that I'm very close to, some of them have absolutely no tolerance for any of this type of talk of sovereignty or of separation, and others, including some family members of mine, quite frankly, who are chiming in on my social media posts or telling me they're ready to pack their metaphorical bags. They're ready to move on. And I find myself, professionally, I suppose, inserting myself into situations like these, trying to facilitate conversations. And we always say seeking to understand. I think that these conversations are going to be happening over beers and over coffees and on soccer sidelines and swimming pools and everywhere, golf courses, you name it, community halls. Albertans and Canadians are talking about this. And oftentimes they're going to encounter opinions different than their own that aren't so very easily dismissed. What would be your message to people that are earnestly seeking to understand where other people are coming from? What's something that you think is inherently important for them to focus on or to truly understand?
Well, I think Indigenous people of this great land, we were never the problem. And I think that's important for people to understand. We look what's happening around us, and even in the world, the amount of fighting. And the world can learn from this peace treaty. This was a peace treaty to share the land, the depth of a plow. Somewhere it went sideways. The depth of a plow is 6 inches, and not the extraction of all the critical minerals and the resources and the timber and benefiting and leaving the First Nations behind. And now people are going to start to realize, and they do a little bit of homework and looking into the NRTA and looking how we couldn't even leave the reserve and vote again. And this is real. So, that's the kind of message that I want to give, that the treaty was to share the land collectively in peace. And now we're stuck on reserves and we're the poorest people around.
There's a lot of talk through this election campaign, both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre referencing a national energy corridor, talking about opportunities to expand Alberta's energy exports and the like. Obviously, those types of initiatives have been met with opposition in past, in some cases, including First Nations in particular. I think of the Northern Gateway pipeline. But there's a lot of talk now about Indigenous investment. Chief Billy Morin, recently elected as a Conservative MP, was on the show yesterday talking a little bit about that. And I know he's been a big advocate for opportunities for Indigenous or First Nations investment. Of Treaty 6 First Nations, is there a collective position when it comes to talk about energy expansion and national energy corridor and potential investment opportunities?
Well, I want to say, first of all, every nation is autonomous. Mm-hmm. But I believe, there are many First Nations that are lined up with the province of Alberta and the Canadian government on energy corridors, on pipelines, Energy East, and also looking at ways to get our energy and our resources to Tidewater, and we are meeting, foreign investors, and we're also meeting Asian markets, and we are open for business, and that's part of the solution. A First Nation shouldn't have to be fighting over 3 months of brushing over 10 other bands. We should be at the table at the beginning, with industry and other countries and probable partners overseas that will help us see a win-win for everybody at the table.
Grand Chief, I wanted to ask you about May 5th. For 15 years or so, it's been recognized as Red Dress Day and commemorated as such, with obviously solemn and somber recognition across the country and, for that matter, around the world. Wonder if I can ask where your head and your heart was at on May the 5th on Red Dress Day, and what your message might be to the folks that are checking out this show.
Well, I believe, my heart and my mind was with my brother, whose daughter in 2012 was murdered here in the city. Sorry. And I think that, for the people that are listening, Red Dress Day, Orange Shirt Day is just not put your pin on one day a year. It's about respecting the woman, the life givers of this country. There's nothing more powerful than a lady that can bring life into this world, and I think when you look at Manitoba, hats off to Wab Kinew and what he did in that search at that landfill. This is real. This is real. And our women are beautiful, and they should be treated as such. And the world needs more love and kindness, and that's the kind of messages we bring to the table. And just because we're kind and loving, that people should learn from us, and I want to acknowledge all the sisters that have gone to the spirit world and the ones that have not been found, that maybe a door will open for the family and there'll be closure for everybody in the near future.
I want to thank you for taking that question and for sharing something so significant, and I'm sorry for your family's loss. We appreciate your perspective, Grand Chief, and thanks for making time for us on the show today.
Thank you.
That's Grand Chief Greg Desjarlais, Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations. You can let us know what you think about that interview by leaving a comment on the YouTube episode. If you're watching or listening to this live, hop into our live chat powered by Park Power. Let us know what you think about what you're hearing. Again, the Premier will be joining us on the show Thursday on the 8th of May, out of the gates, live streaming 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern, or you can catch it later on demand. No surprise, obviously, folks have a lot to say on this. It's a television address. Not every Premier's address will get the eyes and ears of the entire nation, but this one's a little bit different. I think because of the stakes. I think because of the scenario, the situation right now, right? The Mark Carney pulls off what many thought to be absolutely impossible, saving the Liberals' fortunes and somehow remarkably retaining government, a minority government, albeit, but government nonetheless. The Conservatives while achieving a couple of million more votes. Pierre Poilievre's got a new video out where he's reminding his supporters of that. As he's walking, by the way, across a prairie landscape, the campaign begins, right? He's got to get his seat there in Battle River Crowfoot in this by-election. Kind of a weird scenario for the Conservatives, right? Lots of reason for optimism. A couple of million more votes, more than 20 more seats, but not government. That's not what they expected. And Conservatives across the country probably a little bit shell-shocked and certainly pissed off. The fuck Trudeau flags have just sort of morphed into fuck Carney flags. The guy's only been around for a short period of time. It tells you where the temperature's at right now. So when the premier starts kind of sort of fanning the flames of separation, but not really, people start to wonder what all of this means for obvious reasons. Whiterium says Alberta's all treaty land. There really is no Alberta. It's a cover sheet over the mattress that is the treaty system. Tara Lynn says the premier's become masterful at playing to all sides, placating the separatists while suddenly showing interest in Indigenous rights so she has a place to point a finger. It will cause more division. The premier did, as she wrapped up her address, and Johnny will get to this clip now, she basically... She kind of did try to speak to everybody at the end. And if you're trying to pin your finger on it, you'll have a bit of a difficult time. The clip's a little bit longer, but I think it's important to play it, this segment in its entirety. Here's essentially how she wrapped up the whole thing.
There are thousands of Albertans who are so frustrated with the last 10 years of Ottawa's attacks on their friends' and families' livelihoods that they feel Alberta would be stronger and more prosperous as an independent nation. That is an understandable and justifiable feeling to have, even if we disagree on what to do about it. These Albertans are not traitors, nor should they ever be treated as such. They just love their province and family and want a better future than the one Ottawa is offering them right now. There are also thousands of Albertans that are so attached and loyal to their identity as Canadians that there is nothing Ottawa has done to our province that would justify Alberta leaving Canada. It's not that they think everything is perfect, or that we've been treated fairly. They just believe being part of Canada, despite those problems, has much more value than leaving. These individuals are also loyal Albertans and should never be accused of being anything less. And then there are hundreds of thousands of Albertans that probably feel a lot like I do, that are deeply frustrated with the way our province has been mistreated and damaged by successive federal Liberal governments, and are not willing to tolerate the status quo any longer. But these Albertans still believe there is a viable path to a strong, free, and sovereign Alberta empowered to succeed and prosper within a united Canada. A Canada where the federal government actually honors the Constitution, upholds provincial rights, and empowers provinces to pursue their unique potentials as their people so choose. Regardless of what each of us believes about this issue or what path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues with our friends, family members, and neighbors. I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the best solution for this immense challenge we face and come out of it stronger and more free than ever. I'll always put my faith in Albertans to find the right path. I trust you. May our beautiful Alberta always remain forever strong and free.
So kind of an inspiring note, I guess, or at least an intent to inspire at the end, trying to kind of talk to everybody. But at the end of the day, the takeaway, and everyone will probably have different takeaway from all of this. I'm going to get to a couple of your emails in a second. One from Tom down in Lethbridge, one from Ron as well. They were all fired up. We got these about 5 minutes after the TV address wrapped last night. What I was left wondering is, what is this all about then, right? If you're either kind of like into it or not. Now, I tweeted the other day, I said, give the separatists what they want. Give them a referendum. In my words, let's end this stupidity once and for all. Throw it on the municipal ballot in October, and let's see the numbers. Let's see what it returns. You know, my forecast, somewhere between 20 and 35%. That's my guess, based on how well third-party efforts go and organizing committees and billboard campaigns and grassroots campaigns. And let's make no mistake, those would be working on both sides, so to speak, right? The proud Canadians living in Alberta and the proud Albertans ready to leave Canada. Both would be organizing. Both would have lawn signs. Both would be gathering signatures. Both would be raising money. And that's how it would all play out. But if the Premier firmly and strongly believes that Alberta's place is in Canada, then most folks would expect her to operate under that understanding, not to placate or to play games with the separatists, not to make it easier for the referendum, and then to suggest that while her government wouldn't put a question to leave Canada in plain terms, if Albertans wanted that, then they would. Then the question is, why not just come out and say it? Why not just come out and say that you're prepared to put the question on there? You know that supporters want the question on there, so the question will be on there in 2026 when the UCP calls an early provincial election. But if the treaty rights must be respected and if separation is not an option under the treaty relationship, then what are we even doing here? That's the question I would imagine not just Albertans are asking, some Albertans, many Albertans, but folks in neighboring provinces as well. And we're hearing from some of you. We have a message from Anne in Vancouver that I'm going to get to during this show. On our live chat powered by Park Power, Wobbly Inc. says, Jespo, you're not alone in having family with opposing views. Says it's a balancing act to stay empathetic to their concerns and also to protect your own values. I think that that's well said. That's really well said. Jillian says it's frustrating because all of this is just a distraction, but the media's going for it. It is what everybody's talking about right now. Folks aren't talking about some other pretty important and pretty significant things, right? Fair point to be made. Jordan says, I lived in Quebec before, during, and after the 95 referendum. It would be a disaster to even try to separate. Never mind how it would affect the structure of the province. That from Jordan. And Jim makes a very good point as well. And Jim, I've been kind of picking and choosing, and if I'm being honest, alternating my words, sovereign and separate. Sovereign and separate. Jim says sovereign is mushy and probably what a question will include. Separate or separation is more direct. So what does sovereign mean? That's a big question from Jim. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the question that we're endeavoring to answer, isn't it? I want to get to a couple of your emails here, and then we've got a disability roundtable locked and loaded for today. There's a rally at the Alberta Legislature. This is one of the issues that's not being discussed because of all this referendum talk, all this anger, this fire that's burning in Alberta. But there's folks living with disabilities and advocates for people with disabilities that say that thousands and thousands of people are getting a raw deal and have been getting a raw deal for many years, and they're not going to take it anymore. We're going to be checking in with Zachary Weeks and Michelle Kristinson in about 10 minutes' time. First, I want to let you know that this episode happens with the amazing support of our friends at Friesen Brothers, and they want you to know coming up this weekend on the 10th and 11th of May, if you don't yet have plans for Mother's Day, and you got to show mom that you care about her, you love her, you appreciate her, and you're pulling out all the stops, well, Friesen Brothers has you covered. That's right, Friesen Brothers Fresh Market Stores hosting an all-you-can-eat Mother's Day brunch on the 10th and 11th of May, featuring all your favorite traditional brunch treats, along with special desserts that are created by Friesen Brothers Red Seal chefs, with family-friendly prices of $22 for adults, $15 for seniors, and $10 for kids 12 and under. It's the perfect occasion to celebrate with the whole family. You can find more information at friesen.com/Mother's Day Brunch. We're pretty excited. Northwest Film Fest is getting set to launch on the 8th of May. We have a Real Talk Roundtable coming up on that. Really excited, but you can get your all-access passes on sale today and check out the full lineup at northwestfest.ca. Check this out. Opening night, they've got a real big one coming up. Be ready to kick off Edmonton's world-famous summer season from May 8th to the 15th with Northwest Film Fest blasting the roof off the Garneau with a huge double feature Brit pop extravaganza as Blur to the end and Blur live at Wembley Stadium make their highly anticipated Alberta premieres with 4-star reviews across the board. These two incredible films are the next best thing to being on the road with one of the biggest bands in the world. Then sitting in the front row for their incredible live show, Northwest Film Fest 2025, also featuring some of the hottest films from this year's Sundance and South by Southwest film festivals, including the Alberta premiere of The Librarians from filmmaker Kim A. Snyder and executive producer Sarah Jessica Parker. Keep an eye out for the Northwest Film Fest Real Talk Roundtable coming up later this week. And again, you can get your tickets on their website at northwestfest.ca. If all this talk about Alberta's sovereignty and business relationships and energy expansion has you thinking about your own business, never mind tariffs, never mind exchange rates, never mind a new government, you're going to want to check out the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce Instagram page at instagram.com/Edmonton Chamber. They're always advocating for chamber members. And coming up on the 8th of May this week, on Thursday, they present the Chamber's State of Our City 2025. I'm proud to be hosting it, featuring a panel of Doug Griffiths, the Edmonton Chamber CEO, Tracy Bednard from Explore Edmonton, Tim Shipton from OEG, Go Oilers, Eddie Robart, City Manager, and Kaylin Anderson from Build Edmonton Metro. That's May the 8th. You can learn more about that event and advocacy efforts, plus benefits of membership, by checking out edmontonchamber.com. And while we're on it, check your calendar for the 14th and 15th of May. That's the first ever Nisku Energy Show. That's right, the inaugural Nisku Energy Show, bringing together leaders from all parts of the energy sector as a hub for local innovation and collaboration. This show is going to highlight the expertise and advancements shaping Alberta's future. They're going to have amazing networking opportunities. They've got a job fair going on, the Premier's Breakfast on the 14th of May. You can get your tickets today, the 2025 Nisku Energy Show, by visiting yourchamber.ca. John Hicks, technical producer of this show, keeping the plane flying. It's good to see your face.
Yeah.
Your thoughts? You had a chance to check out some of what the Premier had to say to Albertans yesterday. How did I think that everybody's probably it's gonna resonate with everybody differently. Everybody's gonna take something different from it. What did you take from it?
Well, I don't want to attack the Premier directly. Also, she's going to be in our studio in a couple days. Maybe she'll look right at me.
You don't want to make it awkward?
No, but what I will say is, and I'm saying this respectfully. Actually, no, I'm not. We need to shut the fuck up about this. And I agree with you. Like, let's have this vote tomorrow. I'm with Max Fawcett as well. I will vote on this afternoon if I get an email to go to school and walk in a line and do it. And let's get it over with, because we know it's not going to happen. And I think we have bigger problems in this country, bigger problems in this province. They're all kind of the same. Access to healthcare, access to affordable housing, what's going on with Trump affecting the whole world. These are the things we should be focused on, not on this. And, I get you. Not separatist, but I hear these people, you've got them too, your friends who are like, well, maybe we would be better off, with no comprehension of what that would mean for their lives, for the country, for their kids.
Yeah.
In 50 years, when their kids say, hey, why did Alberta become its own country? Well, they wouldn't give us a pipeline. And they're going to be like, what the fuck's a pipeline? Well, it used to bring us gas that powered our cars before everyone drove EVs now. Like, it's just ridiculous to me. And people are like, well, if the majority of Albertans vote for it, you're going to have to accept it. I keep hearing this, Ryan, from people. And you know what I say? I say, isn't this whole thing because you guys won't accept the majority vote of the country for the prime minister? Like, the whole thing boggles my mind. But I agree. Everyone should have a say. So let's have the fucking vote today. Let's have the 30% at the most, which I don't even think it'll get that, come out. Let's have a third of Alberta say we're mad. And then let's say, great, but we're not separating. So let's get back to what we should be focusing on, which is like how to make people's lives better and more affordable.
Is it possible, I'm putting you on the spot here, to play
Rachel
our Rachel
Notley.
Notley
It's
short
ready.
from
Here
yesterday?
it is.
All right, here's
They are not winning on the things that they're actually elected to be in charge of right now. Instead, they yell, they fight, they shake their fists, they point at clouds, and they hope that everybody looks up at the cloud that they should be angry at, as opposed to the person who's responsible for making sure their kids learn to read and write and have a good life. If I were still Premier, I would not have been throwing gasoline been on the fire for my own personal political gain for the last 6 years. It started with Kenny. He has to take ownership for this. He brought that group of people together. He gave them the voice. He gave them power. He used them to bring the two parties together. Danielle Smith just took the next chapter in the book that he started writing, giving voice to a small group of people. She is stoking the anger for solely one purpose, and that is her political bottom line, not the balancing of the family checkbook at the end of every month at the kitchen table. That's not the bottom line she's concerned about.
So that was Rachel Notley on our episode May the 5th, the 10th anniversary, by the way, of her Orange Crush victory. Wanted to have her on to mark that 10-year mark and then get her comments on the 10 years that have followed since in Alberta politics. How did the NDP interrupting or toppling that 43 and change year PC dynasty, that almost 44-year conservative dynasty, how did it change Alberta politics forever? Right? How did the 2019 election, Jason Kenney uniting Alberta's two conservative parties and winning with a big mandate? That was the first election ever in Alberta where a premier, let's say, received more than 1 million votes. She had a lot to say about it, and as you heard right there, she kind of pins this whole thing on both of them. But she says, again, it's a distraction from other issues that matter. Why don't we meet a couple of Albertans that are working their tails off to keep issues that matter on the radar? Zachary Weeks is a nationally recognized disability advocate, an accessibility strategist, and a policy consultant based in Edmonton. Born with cerebral palsy, Zachary spent 2 decades pushing for equitable systems across housing, health, education, and employment. He's advised government and industry on accessibility. He sits on the City of Edmonton's Accessibility Advisory Committee, and he's a director with Women's Para Hockey of Canada. Zachary, I should also mention, you and I shared a stage just a short time ago as you were honored and recognized as an Edifier Award winner. It's nice to have you on Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us today.
Well, we certainly did, Ryan, and thanks so much. It's good to see a friendly face every now and again.
Yeah, I'll let people know that you and I have known each other. I think we're coming up on 20 years, 15 at the very least, and it's been incredible to see your advocacy not just sustained, but grow over the years. Let's meet Michelle Kristinson. Michelle grew up with a father with progressive MS, so she's been doing advocacy professionally for more than 30 years. She considers herself to essentially be a lifelong disability advocate. Michelle's the manager for government relations and advocacy with Cerebral Palsy Alberta, in which role she oversees the Alberta Ability Network, which is a collaborative of more than 100 disability organizations, advocates, individuals with lived experience, academics, and government. Michelle, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I want to encourage both of you to speak freely. Feel free to interrupt each other and me. Let's keep the talk as real as possible. Zachary, in the context of issues that demand to be addressed and resolved, not just in the province of Alberta, I think we're going to talk some federal politics too. What absolutely needs to be on people's radar right now?
Well, I think first and foremost, today we're having a rally to address all these issues. Your question is a good one. And honestly, where do I start? There's been AISH cuts, there's been clawbacks to CDB, which is the Canada Disability Benefit, cutting of funding to nonprofit organizations that do advocacy work because they were deemed not, doing essential work, essentially, which is mind-boggling to me. But more so, what we really need is accessibility legislation here in Alberta, because we're one of two that does not have accessibility legislation in Canada. So in the spirit of not being last, I don't want to be last. So let's get some accessibility legislation in to help protect our most vulnerable people.
So, Zachary, to be clear, and we'll put some numbers in front of the audience, $49 million cut from AISH this year with more reductions planned. If anybody watching or listening knows any AISH recipients, they already know, and I say this respectfully, that it's a paltry amount. It's not a living amount. It's an amount that no average citizen would be able to survive on. Alberta's also confirmed that it will deduct with the Canada Disability Benefit. It will deduct that $200 per month benefit from AISH payments. Other provinces allowing or permitting disabled people to keep the full amount. Alberta's policy, sort of, I guess, swimming against the stream, going against the norm. Is this the deal when it comes to this file, Michelle? Has Alberta been lagging behind the entire time? Has this been a trend?
Well, if you were to hear from the government, they would say this is the most generous benefit in the country. And you'll hear them saying it's generous at $1,901 per month. But unfortunately, generous compared to what? Generous poverty. If you break down 1901, it's not even $11 an hour. So it is a paltry. It's generous compared to other provinces, but not generous in terms of people making a living from this or being able to live on it. And with the Canada Disability Benefit, the CDB, the federal government implemented this to help alleviate poverty. And by the Alberta government reducing that $200, that is not an elimination of poverty. So it's very, very concerning.
Zachary, I want to talk about accessibility legislation. When you say that most of the country has passed it, but Alberta has not, obviously you're an advocate, and like we said, you've worked with government, you've worked with industry. You're also just like a guy who uses a chair, and accessibility challenges. I mean, you've got a brave smile on your face, and you always have. But I know that there's I would imagine frustrations and challenges every single day. What would accessibility legislation do, and what's life like in Alberta without it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, what I will say off the hop is that our government, specifically Minister Jason Nixon and Rick McIver, continually give us this rhetoric of we have all these nice building codes and building guides and all this stuff, which is nice, but to be honest, accessibility goes beyond just a ramp and an elevator in today's day and age. So we need a legislation that is way more diverse, that covers things like captioning, ASL at all public events. For example, just a quick story, when we were going through COVID, I have friends who are deaf. They had no clue what was going on with health measures because there was no ASL or captioning on any of the, major addresses. So nonetheless, we had to push for that to be implemented. Having access to healthcare where my friends don't have to, have a prostate exam in the back of their wheelchair van because they can't access their doctor's office, or the hospital doesn't have the proper measures in place to transfer them onto a bed and do it with dignity. What else? Education, having equal and equitable access to learning opportunities for, educational assistants. We just had that big strike. Guess who the first was impacted? It was kids with disabilities. They were sent home, said essentially, sorry, you're too much of a problem, to educate because, they're going on strike and we have no backup plan to help educate you. So they forced parents to take their vacation days off work, sick days to stay with their kid at home, when that's really up to our education system. So really, there's tons of opportunity here to move the needle, and I'm sure Michelle can highlight some more, but those are just some of the things off the top of my head that we can address.
Well, I would add, if you don't mind, I would add that accessibility legislation would look at removing, identifying, and the barriers that exist around the province. So rather than it being reactive, it would be proactive. So right now, if there's discrimination at work based on disability, someone has to file a human rights complaint. Accessibility legislation says, let's take a look and see where the barriers are. Let's put accessibility plans in place. Let's put plans in place that are designed by people with disabilities. There would be some kind of office, some kind of public office that would make sure people are following these accessibility plans. So it's not fixing the problem as it presents itself, where once again, people with disabilities have to go improve themselves over and over. Oh, I can't get in here. Well, then, what's this long process to be able to get into that building? By the time they get into the building, there's another barrier. So that would be removing it. And I think that the other thing that's really important is that there are over 30 pieces of legislation currently for disabilities, but some are very specific and some disabilities aren't included at all. So all people with disabilities in the province need to have this protection through accessibility legislation. And the province seems to be on a path where they want to continue to do it piecemeal, and it's just not working.
Our live chat is this is resonating with the people that are watching and listening right now. Dan says, I've received just over $500 a month from Alberta, the rest taken from CPP. I haven't seen a proper doctor for more than 30 years, despite my multiple health issues, which are turning into a health crisis. Jim, speaking candidly, says, I got cut off AISH yesterday. Says they treat you like shit and then they tell you you're lucky. Cheryl outside says civil society, quoting Gandhi, is measured by how it treats its most vulnerable members. Michelle, I want to ask, learn a little bit more about this Alberta Ability Network. It's a collaborative of more than 100 disability organizations and other groups, individuals with lived experience and the like. I think it says something. I'm assuming that, this rally that you're putting on today at the Alberta Legislature and these ongoing efforts are part of a collective effort. In other words, these are recurring themes. These are persistent issues, regardless of what someone's disability might look like.
Correct. I wish I could say that 25 years ago I wasn't working on issues around AISH, but here we are 25 years later, and it maybe looks slightly different. The landscape is different, but the issues aren't. People are still living in poverty, and they're still begging for basic services, and it's growing worse. It seems that there is this idea that people should have to prove and prove and prove again that they're disabled, when all the medical professionals have shown that they're disabled. They've gone through comprehensive application processes. It really is not a very humanistic perspective.
We got an interesting point here as well from Jonathan, and I suspect we could probably come up with a million different examples of how I know you're talking about disability rights as human rights and government inaction forcing disabled people into poverty. But Jonathan just says we need to talk about uncapped rent and utilities taking most of an AISH recipient's cash. Do the both of you hear that from people time and time again? I mean, I have to admit, what did you say, $1,900 a month? And that's even higher than what I've heard. As far as I know, in competitive rent situations, unless somebody gets lucky, if you can find something these days, never mind with accessibility options, you're looking at what, like between $1,000 and $1,500 a month, and then you're going to pay your utilities, and then what? And then you're going to eat from there, and I guess utilize a food bank. But what are you hearing from people?
Well, one thing we did hear that was really interesting is MLAs voted themselves a rent increase, or their living allowance increase to $2,200 because they couldn't make it on the $1,900 that they had previously. So, they get $2,200 just for their living allowance, whereas people with disabilities that are on AISH have to make all of their financial decisions based on 1901, if that's the amount that they get.
What's MMA? I feel like I should know this. Laura's checking in. She says it's a horrible process. Says Aish, I receive, and we're hearing from a lot of people. This is people with lived experience right now that are watching and listening to this. Says I receive $1,200 a month, and my MMA is almost half of that, including my rent. Says the rest of my bills, and then you've got to eat as well. I mean, people are talking. You're finding people in a situation where $10-20 either way is a big deal. Zach, you must hear this a million times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And quite frankly, I think, the people I've heard from, rent in Calgary, for example, I've heard 2,600. So, how can anybody live on 1901? And, that was good in 1994. And the government keeps saying, well, we're the highest, benefit in the country. First of all, that's wrong. It's the Yukon that pays the most. And also, why even compare, why brag about having the highest steaming pile of garbage, right? It's still a steaming pile of garbage. And that's where I think, again, the accessibility legislation, if I was crafting it, I would make sure that there are caps on rents, something that is affordable based off of your income. I think, what is it, 30% of your income should go towards, housing.
Yeah, max. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, absolutely. These are the things that go beyond just, oh, well, we have these building guides, right? We need to make sure that we have access to accessible housing, getting into a house. I'm very blessed in the fact that I live in a house, but guess what? I paid for the whole house, but I only got half of it because I can't get into the basement. So, it becomes a lesson of, if it's good enough for Albertans, it's good enough for me, for Danielle Smith. So if 1,901 is a great amount and we should be really grateful for that, it's good enough for Zachary or Michelle, well, then it's good enough for me. If I only get access to half of my house, it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, right? So, needless to say, if they participate in that, I don't think they'd be agreeing that it's good enough.
It's all about dignity, Zachary. That's what this all comes back to. It's what you've been reminding people for many, many years. Emily G in our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, says Aish has always been horrible. Says they harassed my best friend's sister who had very low functioning Down syndrome with underlying stressors. Michelle, I know that the rally today is at the Alberta Legislature to put pressure on the provincial government, but if I know anything about political interviews, political posturing, the art of politicking, so to speak, is that every elected official can find somebody else to blame. It's always another level of government's fault. So how much of this is municipal? How much of this is provincial? How much of this is federal?
Well, right now, the issues that we're taking to the legislature today are provincial issues. So that's the accessibility legislation. It's a provincial act. AISH, all of the income support programs, they're provincial. So this is square on the province. And I think one thing that we didn't bring up, and I'm not sure, I'm going to just jump into it, is the ADAP program. So that's the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, or the Alberta Disability Assistance Program. And that was introduced at the beginning of February. It was quite a surprise to Albertans on AISH. And Mr. Nixon announced that there would be a new program starting in a year. And that program would move people from AISH to this ADAP program. because of this untapped ability for people to work. So if individuals who could work that were on AISH could move to this program, the idea was that they would have higher earning exemptions. But what's happened is they've introduced this program with very little information to substantiate what the process is, how that's going to look, and they've left people who are currently living on AISH absolutely fearful, uncertain, not knowing what's going to happen in the future. And we've been accused of being fear mongers because we're saying, because people are concerned, but they haven't provided any further information. At the time of the press release, they said that they would be providing more information to recipients in March, and nothing has happened.
Erica's watching, says it's crazy to me that if your spouse makes minimum wage, they hold that against you for AISH benefits. A single person can barely live on minimum wage, let alone a couple. Les is in our chat, throwing 10 in the super chat. Les, I sure appreciate that, $10. But he says, hey, never mind the fact that when you turn 65, they claw back your disability benefits. He says, it's not like I can suddenly stand up and run the Boston Marathon. Is that accurate? Does that really happen?
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah,
so what happens if you're 65 in a day? What happens to these people?
Well, then they're caught back even further, and then again, Ryan, it goes back to that legislation. Like that in itself is a federal issue, right? Because now you're relying on CPP and old age security and GIS. So that's where a good solid legislation with teeth would work with all levels of government, and that's where I think the premier is essentially trying to separate Alberta, in my opinion, from the rest of the country, when we need to be having a premier that works with other parties, other leaders, the prime minister, for goodness sake. So yeah, I that's why we're doing the work now, and I get it. Like, change is slow, and I've lost many a nights of sleep over the fact, just like Les, right? Like, what about these people that are getting pulled back, rather, more and more, stripped of their dignity? That's why I'm having friends that are, applying for MAID. And what kind of world are we living in when you're just wanting to end your life because the system is too hard to play in?
Zachary, are you telling me that you personally know people that are considering or applying for medical assistance in dying based not on the physical pain and suffering related to a disease or disability, but because of other factors, including financial factors?
Yes, I have been approached and have received texts saying, like, look, there's no point of living. Like, it's too hard. I've been doing this for too long, on top of all the other bullshit they have to deal with, right? So, yes, the short answer is yes. And I personally believe that MAID is there for a reason. If you're terminal or you have incredible pain that you deal with, that there's no real solution to. I mean, nobody wants to live a life like that. It's about quality, not quantity. I've always said that, and I don't want to be thinking or having to resort to a 5-page form to end my life because the government is too short-sighted to act with a little bit of integrity. What if this was their life or their loved one's life that have been impacted? And if it is, boy, I I don't know I sure hope, when they meet their maker, that he has some major, or she has some major forgiveness for them. Because, yeah, how sad is it that it's only a 5-page form to do made and copious amounts of paperwork just to prove that Zachary still is in a wheelchair the following year.
Thanks for this reality check, Zachary. I really appreciate it. I know that you're speaking on behalf of thousands of people right now. Michelle, we're going to be talking to the Premier on Thursday on this show on the 8th of May. On behalf of the Alberta Ability Network, this collective of more than 100 different organizations, what's a question that you'd like the Premier to directly answer?
That's a fantastic question. When will they move forward with implementing accessibility legislation? We need this now.
To the point. Zachary, when's this rally today? What's happening? For people that are actually listening to this or watching this on the 6th of May and are available or motivated to join you and show their support, what are the details?
Yeah, so come on down, join me and Michelle and hopefully hundreds others at 12 p.m. On the legislature steps. We're going to be having a variety of speakers to highlight their own struggles, because I'm a firm believer of nothing about us without us. It cannot just be Zachary always yapping about accessibility and this sucks, that sucks, all that stuff. It needs. I'm only one perspective, so we have a variety of different speakers with lived experience, and then just freshly announced, we will be hearing from Naheed Nenshi. So he is weighing in on this at the rally, and I look forward to hearing his thoughts. And the times act is now. Act now. Hashtag act now.
There you go, my man. With your trademark smile, I know that while you've got the fire that burns in your belly, you've also got an incredible and admirable amount of optimism. I've always loved that about you, Zachary, and I've got much respect for what you're doing. Thank you for making time for us today. We've been hearing from Zachary Weeks and Michelle Kristinson. If you want to learn more about the Alberta Ability Network, you can check out their website, ababilitynetwork.ca. We'll link to that in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. And again, that rally today, we're talking to you on Tuesday, the 6th of May at noon at the Alberta Legislature. Thanks to both of you for your advocacy. Thanks for lighting a fire under this audience. Michelle, if I can read body language, it looks like you got one more thing that you want to say.
I do. I just want to direct people also to Barrier Free Alberta, and that's the initiative from the Alberta Ability Network. So Barrier Free Alberta is focused on accessibility legislation. So it's barrierfree.ca, and people can go there and sign up for to support getting accessibility legislation. There's also a letter campaign on there that you can get involved in, and we'll give you updates. And we just need all Albertans to sign on, because accessibility isn't just about people with disabilities. It's about seniors, people with temporary injuries, moms with prams pushing their babies. So join us. We'd love to have you.
Yep, no kidding. Barrierfreeab.ca is where you can learn more about that. We've been hanging out with Michelle Kristinson and Zachary Weeks. Thanks for doing this, you two.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
You bet. We'll hop in the Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, because Tony just says awesome guests today. Tony, we want every single show to be an absolute banger. And so I'm grateful that you feel that way. Jillian says, thank you for this segment. Thank goodness for Real Talk. This is just unbelievable how poorly these folks are being treated by our rich province. Well said. Tara Lynn says, thank you, Michelle and Zachary, for speaking and for opening eyes. This has been a valuable show for sure. Man, oh man, I want to get to a lot of these. Johnny, I know you want to chime in as well. But yeah. I mean, people are just saying.
I just wonder why this province is doing so bad at this. It just boggles my mind, because I grew up in Ontario, spent a lot of time in the city in Toronto, spent 7 years in Vancouver. Vancouver's like a dream. I'm not saying it's a dream, but if you're a disabled person, there's ramps everywhere. There's access to everything.
Yeah.
And it just boggles my mind that Alberta is like I mean, I was trying to look at stats as they were talking, but pretty much the bottom. We're at the bottom of the list for all of Canada for access for disabled individuals.
We're at the bottom of the list for a lot of things. We're at the bottom of the list for
that's unacceptable.
Per student spending on education.
Ridiculous.
You know what I mean? Like it's and it is a very prosperous province. That's a fact. But we don't reflect it. In where we allocate our expenditures. And I know that there's a lot of people like, listen, we have these conversations all the time. I'm happy to be in this kind of mushy middle, this gray area, like where nothing's black and white. And we talk about like, how do we invest in proper social programs? How do we support our most vulnerable citizens? How do we, preserve and encourage dignity and dignified treatment in the province of Alberta, while at the same time running balanced budgets and keeping the province's economic landscape healthy and continuing to contribute to industry and removing red tape for business and all of the things. Like it is all possible, right? And I think that it takes a motivated and a visionary political leader and a political party willing to take some of the political risks to do it. It takes political gumption to raise AISH, whether or not they say it. It takes political gumption to implement things like a rent cap. I have reservations and concerns around rent caps. I do, around market interference. I've been open about that before. I'm being real with you. That's where I land on this. But my opinion or my understanding is deepened. My opinion may evolve based on interviews and conversations like this, where I understand that it's not always all about me. So where do you find that balance? Like what does good, smart, equitable legislation look like? You know, it doesn't make sense to me. Again, as I was looking at these numbers as they're talking about what we spend per province and how accessible provinces are, to me, I would think that like a smaller, like maybe like PEI or something, because of the landscape or because of their economy, it's smaller. Maybe they're at the but why a big proud province like Alberta that boasts about every other thing can't get this thing right? Yeah. For the vulnerable people here, for the disabled people here who just want to live a regular life, have access to all the same things. I don't understand why. It just hasn't been a priority.
It's just ridiculous.
It hasn't been a priority.
It's ridiculous.
Ken K., one of our YouTube channel members, Ken, it's great to see you chiming in, says the ultimate moral test of any government, the way it treats its three groups of citizens. First, those in the dawn of life, our children. Second, those in the shadows of life. He's quoting Hubert Humphrey, by the way. Our needy, our sick, our handicapped. Third, those in the twilight of life, our elderly. That from Ken. Thanks for popping that in the chat. JJ says, if we leave the most vulnerable behind, ignore their concerns, their suffering, their unique journeys in this life that we can make better, we dare not call ourselves a civilized society.
I like that. Yeah, and also we've talked about this before. Like if you think this doesn't affect you, I mean, we all know someone, and we're all going to become that person. I mean, we're all going to get old. We're all going to have a cane. We're all going to be in a chair. We're all going to need better access to things and be able to make life easier for people like that. This is going to happen to everyone eventually. So this would be something everyone advocates for. But again, I'll say this a third time. It was pretty mind-boggling when I was just researching behind you during this, because I was like, no, this can't be, right? Because I'd never looked deep into it. And it's like the bottom of the list. The whole country? Yeah. That's
well, and not having accessibility legislation is almost indefensible, right? Like that's the kind of thing where you just go and doesn't she make a good point at the end? Like this is kind of a, let me be awkward for a second, but for a lot of people, an issue doesn't really like land with you until it lands with you. Do you know what I mean? Like MAID is a good example. Medical assistance in dying is a good example. You may feel strongly one way about it. You may oppose MAID, for example, and then somebody that you deeply care about is diagnosed with a disease where all of a sudden the conversation becomes relevant. Someone is diagnosed with ALS, for example, or someone's diagnosed with some other disease, a terminal disease. Maybe it's a form of cancer that's eating away at them, and they're living in horrific pain, and they're choosing the dignified route that is only their own business and is only a conversation between themselves and their doctor. And all of a sudden, that person that you love, well, your perspective changes on this, right? And so I think that there's that thing happening here where all of a sudden you have the conversation, you realize, and it lands with you. That was heartbreaking to hear, Zachary. And this is not the first time that
people
we've
taking
had
their own lives is the better route than
people considering MAID, because I think it was M. Aitken in our chat that basically said, imagine, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said, imagine, just like life gets to the point where you just can't manage and MAID is the only option. Like there's people, and I don't want to use the word forced, but there's people that are certainly probably feeling prompted or led toward that direction. You know, people that have had it in the back of their minds. And by the way, I always want to recognize every single time that we talk about this, I want to just take a second to say that you are loved and you matter. No matter who you are, no matter where you're listening or watching from, you are loved and you matter. But the fact of the matter is there are people that have always felt, or that for quite some time have felt like they're a burden to other people. And guess what? Those people that you think you're burdening, those people love you. But for a lot of folks, when the going gets really tough and when the economics just aren't working out and when nothing's working out and when you're encountering barrier after barrier, some of them physical, some of them metaphorical, then at the end of the day, for some people, it just becomes too much. And that is not the intent of MAID. That is not the spirit of MAID. That's not what it's for. Aaron says, can we all just admit that we treat the most vulnerable terribly in this country? We pretend that we treat them well, but we don't. We just don't. Jonathan says the idea that folks are lesser for having muscle pain that gets worse and worse over time. Ms. KD, great to see you in the chat, says society is only as good at how the most vulnerable are treated. People complain, about the wealth in this province and the fact we got to support the other provinces, but we're not even taking care of our own.
Anubis. Maybe some Albertans want to separate because they're tired of being compared to other provinces and noticing how poor we're doing.
And that's with oil doing well or reasonably well.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if we're talking about, if the reason for separation is because we're not getting a fair shake of the deal, we're not getting our piece of the pie. We want our economy to be stronger. We want Albertans to have more. We can't even do this now. We can't even get up to like halfway up the list of provinces. What are we going to do when we get all this money? Because we're not doing the right thing with it now.
Glenna says it's a mindset. If you choose not to help your friends and neighbors, that is a lifestyle choice. Yeah, Anubis goes on. Yeah, there was a time when Alberta was proud about being more in this country, and now we seem to be fine with barely okay. That's not the messaging, though, right? The messaging is prosperity, right? The messaging is wealth. Kind of reminds me of those televangelists a little bit, to be honest with you. Virtuous Sloth says, I came to this episode late. I'm so glad I caught this segment. Virtuous Sloth, we're glad too. Let us know what you think to talk@ryanjespersen.com. You can send us your emails anytime. I want to get to a couple of, we're going to bring this back. Many of you responding to the Premier's televised address. Obviously, if you're just joining us, we're going to be speaking with Premier Danielle Smith on Thursday, the 8th of May. But I want to get to Tom and Ron's thoughts on this to talk@ryanjespersen.com. You can email us, obviously, 24 hours a day. Leave a comment on our YouTube episodes as well. These conversations, frankly, my friends, valuable ones like this, would not happen without the support of amazing partners like our friends at Solar by Kubi. They're hiring right now. That's right. Their teams have been chomping at the bit through the winter months. Their engineers have been designing the systems ready to be installed, and now their teams are up on roofs across Western Canada. Agricultural, industrial, commercial, and for the most part, residential solar installations. If you can see yourself as a fit, maybe you got your ticket, maybe you're an apprentice, maybe you are one of those engineers that would love to transition into renewables, you can check out the careers link at kubi.ca/solar for a full listing of the opportunities in Alberta and BC right now. Oh yeah, and by the way, you can also get a solar quote. If you're looking at going green this spring or summer, you want to get panels up on your roof, start with that free quote today at kubi.ca. There's a lot of real talk on this show. That's been our brand, friends. We don't shy away from the big questions. And when it comes to your retirement, the questions can feel endless. Like, do I actually have enough to retire, or am I fooling myself? Should I take my CPP early, or should I wait? How do I make sure I don't run out of funds if I happen to be lucky enough to live into my 90s? Or maybe, how do I protect my savings from taxes and inflation or a market crash? Kind of feels more relevant now than ever, doesn't it? If these questions are keeping you up at night, or if you don't even know which questions to ask, then it might be time to talk to the team at North Road Investment Council. Their certified financial planners and chartered financial analysts can answer your biggest retirement and financial planning questions. They're independent fiduciaries who you pay per hour, not through commissions paid by selling you investment products. No fluff, No pressure, just clear advice and strategies that make sense. You can connect with North Road Investment Council today at northroadic.com. If you're planning on improving your living space this summer and you're finally, once and for all, going to get organized and add a little beauty to the aesthetic of your biggest investments, the best place to start is at californiaclosets.ca. A proudly Canadian-owned and operated company, California Closets, it helps you make the most of your space with custom organizational systems. Whether that's an entertainment center where your whole family hangs out, maybe it's a Murphy bed in your home office, maybe it's that dream mud room or laundry room, or maybe you're going to get serious about your garage. They can custom design an installation to fit your space and your budget, and the consultation's always free. You can book that today at californiaclosets.ca. Man, we got people coming at this issue, coming at a lot of issues from a lot of different directions into our live chat, powered by Park Power. We sure appreciate that. Canada's most engaged talk audience, and there's no second place. There's no question about that. That includes Tom, who sent us an email just a very short time after Premier Danielle Smith spoke to Albertans' live televised address. Tom out of beautiful L.A., Johnny, Lethbridge, Alberta. He says, in case there were any doubts, and I did think of saving this, by the way, for the flamethrower on Friday, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, but I figured we'd get to it because it's timely right now. But Tom's throwing punches. He says, in case there were any doubts, Alberta's premier was a science-denying demagogue with designs on the throne of Alberta. Danielle Smith's startling televised speech to the public buried those doubts like a tank of pumped fracking fluid. We can assume other UCP representatives are firm in backing her quest for the queenship, hearing no objection from that quarter. One wonders how the infighting for lesser titles is progressing, whose hopes for royal status rise as high as duke, and who will be satisfied as an earl or a mere baron. Her would-be majesty ignored the urgent warnings from our scientists, even though those warnings say the continued use of fossil fuels is destroying the livable biosphere and could well mean the end of human existence. She called for expanding fossil fuel use with no controls, impediments, taxes, or regulations. I mean, that is kind of the spirit of these demands toward Ottawa. Tom says a cynic would check her investment portfolio. Any hint of inconveniencing oil and gas companies would have to be met with, sorry, a referendum to leave Canada by her loyal subjects. In exchange, they will get trillions and trillions of dollars. She did use the word. He says even First Nations would get something, but only billions. Once we separate, we would naturally need a leader with a certain royal presence. No, dear minion, there's no need to bow yet. That from Tom in Lethbridge. And what about this from Ron, who was very clear when and where he wanted this read, says this is not a flamethrower submission, Jespo, just a calm dissection of a monumentally bad idea. Ron says, I love Alberta. This province has given me so much. I don't like to get political most of the time, but all this talk of separation has led me to seriously consider leaving this great province if a minority has its way. The most realistic outcome from any referendum is that it fails. And even if it succeeds, there's a Supreme Court precedent saying that a province cannot unilaterally leave Confederation. In a time where collaboration must be stressed with threats from south of the border, there are more important things to discuss than bowing to the tyranny of a vocal minority. Ron says it may be a considerable minority, but it's still a minority. There are very real economic concerns this province has that must be addressed, but even if pipeline projects, which a lot of people in this province want, are approved tomorrow, they won't be pumping oil for years, like more than 5 years down the road. And even projects that were approved and are pumping oil as we speak are not at capacity right now because there simply isn't a demand for it. By the way, Jespo here for a second. We've been talking to Markham Hislop. We're going to get him on the show in the next little bit. I want to touch on that specifically. Is TMX like jam-packed, bursting? I shouldn't say bursting at the seams when we're talking about pipelines, should I? But you get the idea. Is there capacity or is there not? Is there an actual market argument for building or expanding pipelines? Okay, back to Ron's email. He says the feds can't wave a magic wand and a pipeline is built and pumping, right? It'll take time, and there's legitimate proposals for pipelines, and those need to be submitted right now, and maybe they'd begin construction in a couple of years. So you don't like that the Liberals won. That's great, and you have every right to be upset, says Ron. I didn't vote for them either. But your vocal minority shouldn't drag the large majority of Albertans still committed to Canada, in spite of its flaws, to separate into either its own landlocked, isolated nation or voluntary annexation by the United States, are two most likely options. Ron says, I'm Canadian before I'm Albertan, and I will fight with every cell in my body to maintain that Alberta is a part of Canada today, tomorrow, and forever. But if the worst comes to worst, and if it does vote to separate, unlikely, I'll have no choice but to leave. That from Ron. You remember we talked to Corey Hogan the morning after he won as Calgary's lone Liberal member of Parliament, of course, one of just two in the province of Alberta. Yeah. And he told us that he was getting that question at the doors because it feels like a loaded question. I've asked the question before on radio shows. Are you a Canadian first or Albertan first? And I thought that Corey's answer was enough. He gets himself off the hook with it, but I think it is a sincere one, and I feel like I would invoke that same answer. And he says, you're asking me to choose, and he doesn't say who is who. He says, but you're asking me to choose between my mother and my father.
It is, yeah. I don't know. It's all... Maybe it's just because I was born in the States. I spent a lot of time in different provinces. I love this country. I mean, in the end, it's all, it's imaginary lines drawn by slave owners who came over here and took land. What are we talking about here? But at the same time, I don't think Albertans who want to separate are thinking this through. First of all, you'd lose the Oilers. They'd be the where are we going to put them after? You come your own country, there goes the NHL.
Well, now you're talking serious.
Yeah. I think that alone would make people check the no box.
Now you're not messing around at all. Speaking of the Oilers, game one, as we do this.
Where you think they go?
We're just hours away.
This should be a show topic.
Wouldn't it be ironic if Alberta separated and they went to Quebec City?
I just think
they go to Quebec City.
They have a way bigger fans are ready for a team there, right? So.
Yeah. I see a lot of you, and I want to reflect this, including Kenzie, who pointed this out, says, Kenzie, I apologize, I can't find the comment, but she basically just said, here it is, teachers should forego any raises until AISH is increased.
Yeah, kind of blurring.
People are kind of clapping back, saying, teachers should be paid well. The education system needs support. It has nothing to do with AISH, except for that they're both being destroyed by the UCP government. I don't know that feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul. I don't know that the teachers are the ones that need to be on the sacrificial block.
I love that you just said that. Someone else in the chat talked about rec centers, and it is true. Like on the south side especially, like I can't go 10 blocks without, like, there's a rec center, an outdoor rink, there's all this stuff. But I mean, we need that stuff in the community as well. I've never personally used like a public rec center or these, like, in these little residential communities where they give you these free outdoor spaces or whatever. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be there and people shouldn't have access to them. I just think, the bottom line is we shouldn't be at the bottom of this list is what I'm saying. Out of all the provinces in Canada, we should be doing way better than last.
Yeah, well, and this is like the exact kind of conversation that we were just having, where you recognize that you don't, as human beings, I think we're inherently hardwired, except for maybe there's some folks with exceptions. Andrew Knack seems like one of these people, Edmonton City Councilor, that seems to be able to walk miles in a lot. The sincerity oozing out of that guy. That's one example of an elected official, I think, that can, and there are several. But for the most part, the average human, myself included, we tend to devalue or to undervalue supports we do not use, right? Like
I try not to do that. Like that's why I just mentioned it. Like I don't use them, but I know people do.
Yeah, and so for example, like I would say, and again, people are going to flip out, and I'm just trying to prove a point quickly. Let me just be glib for a second. But like I would say, I think that we could cut hundreds of millions of dollars from public transit. Why? Because I don't use public transit. Many people rely on public transit.
Yeah.
Public transit is a very solid emissions reduction approach. Public transit, healthy transit, is a sign of a safe and high functioning and well functioning and healthy city, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an example where in my mind, I can see cuts to transit being a no-brainer if a city, for example, is trying to keep property taxes down. But if you use transit every single day and you're not privileged enough or you're not interested enough in having your own vehicle, then that is a preposterous type of scenario. That's one example of a million.
You know what I miss? Because we know I took the bus to work for like 6 months. Part of it, partly as an experiment, partly because I was sharing a vehicle with my partner. Now we have a vehicle each again. But I remember thinking, and it's funny because everyone was complaining about crime and it's so stressful. It was the most relaxing experience, Ryan. Like I think more people should be forced to do it for a few weeks because man, and I see people now like this morning. All the construction has started. Obviously, Alberta has 2 seasons here, winter construction. The whole way to work today, I'm screaming. And then I stop about a couple blocks from here and I see the train pass right like a block from Rogers before I turn to get to work. And people are just reading their phones and sipping coffee and they're just relaxed, just going by on the train and they know they're going to get there in 5 minutes or whatever. They're relaxing. And I'm just sitting in my car like red-faced, being like, why do we have all this construction, even though I know it needs to be done?
Well, so
Fuck this person next to me, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I think everyone should be forced to take public transit for like 4 weeks just to know the beauty of it.
It's never a good time for construction.
No,
it's never a good time for construction.
I mean, you complain about them doing it, but then you complain about the potholes when they're there and they're not fixing it.
Telling you, I was out in Vancouver this weekend. I was just honored. I'm going to be posting about it later today, and y'all can check it out if you want. But I was honored to host the Hope Gala, an evening of hope for Hope International at the magnificent Vancouver Convention Center. Just an unbelievable venue. Johnny, 1,200 people. They get into this room. It raised $800,000
awesome.
For international pro. Yeah, just really incredible. It was a wonderful night to be a part of. That's not the point. The point is I'm leaving the Pan Pacific Hotel, which is right down there by Canada Place. It's right down by the convention center on Sunday, right? And I've got to catch my flight home.
Yeah.
And I step out, and I knew that the Vancouver Marathon was going that morning. And so I step out, and I left myself probably 40 minutes to get to the airport to arrive there an hour early. I was already checked in, should be no problem. But you forget what it's like to be in cities like Vancouver and Toronto when you need to get somewhere.
It's
and
quick.
In Edmonton and
train.
Calgary, you can get everywhere you need in 20, 25 minutes. So I come out and traffic is backed up like crazy. And there's tour buses and there's big rigs related to the marathon and there's police cars and there's all these types of things happening and traffic is like gridlocked.
Got to get on that GO train.
So what do I first do? I'm talking habits. Yeah. So I look on my phone and I see that Uber is surge pricing, right? It's now going to cost me like $70 to get to the airport instead of the $25 that it would have taken before.
Yeah.
And also I'm realizing that I'm going to miss my flight. And I look at the doorman, the bellhop, whatever you call him, the guy at the front. And I say, hey man, just like any ideas, I said, if I walk a couple blocks off, is it smarter to catch an Uber up there? And he's looking at me like I'm from another. And he goes, he says to me, he said it with a smile, a very polite guy.
Yeah.
He says, you're like 300 meters from the Canada line.
Yeah.
He goes, you can take a straight shot to the Vancouver airport. It's going to take you 20 minutes. Same deal, man. Closed my eyes, just rode the rail all the way to the airport. Unbelievable. Cost me like $3 to get there. Amazing.
My time in Vancouver I'm so glad I did it like in my early mid-20s because it was just, you didn't need a car. You still don't need a car in Vancouver. You can go to Stanley Park, all the way to the airport.
Can't afford a car in Vancouver.
Back downtown to near the expo where the science center is, all the way to Kitsillet. Like it's incredible how they have lined up transportation in Vancouver and did it right. They've made some adjustments, but did it right the first time. Whereas I feel like we're constantly complaining about Edmonton just rejigging whatever we've got going on here.
Jonathan says, let's not in the talk about teachers, ACE recipients, and the like, raises going to nurses as well. I've seen that referenced in the chat. Nurses did get a decent raise. They got like a 20% raise over, the life of the deal, 3-4 years. Someone will correct me, I know. But at the same time, you got to look at these professions have not seen raises for many, many years. They've been under pay freezes, and inflation's been crazy. But Jonathan says, don't divide the working class against itself. Vamp says teachers are public servants and should not be highest paid, most benefited employees. We can't afford AISH. Why gold plate union staff pay. I know we're going to hear from some teachers on this. Glenna says separation is a distraction. What is the premier really up to? This is sleight of hand. Anubis says, why is everybody speaking like we can't raise the salaries of teachers and also raise AISH?
I agree.
Those aren't tied together. Can we please stop acting like crabs in a bucket in this province, which is an interesting way to put it. Mark reminding us, I've got news. Mark Doran, Polluter Pay Federation, says the oil and gas industry is far more complex than pipelines. Tara Lynn is concerned that the premier will trigger a drop in housing prices in Alberta because the market will be flooded when folks start leaving en masse. Here's the deal. I don't think people are going to leave en masse because I don't think Alberta's going anywhere, because I don't think that this referendum is going to turn up a result that gives this province any ammunition. Now, I do see some of you in the chat, like I saw, was it Shelby earlier that said, Johnny, and Shelby does make a point, talking about Quebec. Now, this is I think a false equivalence, but Shelby's point says, Johnny, it's about culture, not imaginary lines. When he's talking about provinces.
I love this country. I love this province.
But Quebec, 100%.
I could live in Ontario.
Quebec
I could live in the States. I live in Alberta.
Quebec as a distinct society, that's been a thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And that is a thing.
It's true.
Quebec is a distinct society. And I know Alberta, and again, this is where I'll get hit. Someone on X with no profile picture and numbers behind their name is going to call me, I'm some patriot. You're why do you hate Alberta? This kind of idea. But Alberta has over the course of many, many years tried to assert itself as very similar to Quebec as a distinct or unique society or culture.
No.
And that's just not the fact. Now, I do think that there's as a fact, there's a certain vibe in Alberta. There
100%.
is. It's one we celebrate. Yeah. When we talk to our friends at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce or the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce or Alberta Innovates or Edmonton Unlimited or all of these groups that we talk to, these bold, ambitious thinkers, these entrepreneurs, these problem solvers. You look at Alberta's history in oil and gas and outside of oil and gas. Like what we do in the oil sands is remarkable. The science there is incredible. It's something that Albertans should be proud of. Edmonton, the greater Edmonton region, what we're doing in AI. I mean, some of the smartest thinkers in the world call Alberta home. That's a fact. But when it comes to like a distinct society, I don't think the comparison is there between Alberta and Quebec. That's not a defeatist attitude in Alberta. That's just referencing hundreds of years of history in Quebec, and that's unique situation. I understand why it rubs Westerners the wrong way when they see what they perceive to be unfair treatment, right? Quebec getting all these benefits. Quebec is a recipient of equalization. Alberta not. And so, Shelby, I'll take your point. And I also see that some of you, like Blah Sheep in the text, says, I want a referendum on the table so we can take those results to Ottawa and make sure they stay out of our jurisdiction for resources and such. And I think that that's what the talk about autonomy and sovereignty ultimately comes down to, right? They don't want an emissions cap. They don't want a production cap. They want more pipelines, and they want Alberta to be able to maximize the economic potential of the natural resources. At the end of the day, that's really what this is all about.
But you got to be part of a family. You can't be just the crazy uncle smoking in the basement suite. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? This is a country. You got to work together. But here's the crazy thing. First of all, I'll agree with Justin in our chat, who's just like this is all a distraction. I don't know if it's a deliberate distraction, but I do know that we're wasting way too much fucking time talking about this. We've got way bigger problems in this province, in this country, than getting a bigger piece of the pie. But here's the crazy thing. I mean, look at Mark Carney. He's so negotiable with Trump right off the bat, meeting with Smith, and then putting out a tweet saying, I look forward to working with you. What is this government here in Alberta going to do if Mark Carney does, hey, you know what? You guys have been getting the shit into the stick. Let's do this. Let's remove this for you. Let's give you that. Hey, we're also going to give you a bigger percentage of this. What is this government going to have left to, like Rachel said on the show yesterday, when she said that, it's why we made the short of it. It just hit with me where I agreed. I was like, I think this government spent too much time picking fights. And now it's like, okay, the election is over. Let's try to work together. Let's try to figure out what this province wants and how we can work with the federal government to get it. But instead, as Ryan, you often say, it's take your ball and go home. It's all or nothing.
Yeah. Jillian says, imagine if Alberta voted as strategically as Quebec does instead of whining about what Quebec has. Chelsea the Ginge, would Alberta's pipelines not infringe on the sovereignty of other provinces? Kenzie, most are missing the point of how the federal government hamstrings and ignores Alberta. I mean, of note, Alberta's premier did say that she had a very productive first phone call with Prime Minister Mark Carney. I'm looking forward to asking her about it on
He put out
Thursday.
a tweet being like, we're going to work on things.
So there's a couple of things happening at the same time here. And whatever a better deal looks like, I think that, more information in front of the population. I mean, I guess that's one of the things that we can take from this as a positive, is that more and more people now are going to be actually thinking about something that maybe they haven't thought about before. Now, I saw Alberta Girl earlier in the chat saying, it's just really unfortunate. I'm paraphrasing, said it's just really unfortunate that you guys are giving this any conversation at all, that you're talking about this at all. This does demand to be addressed. I mean, the premier just paid, I don't know what the tab is, but to take over television airwaves, although let's recognize it's, 90% cheaper to advertise on television now than it used to be, because nobody watches television.
State of the
commercials
Union
anymore.
address,
but it's expensive to put on. So when the premier of a province addresses the province, and like I said out of the gates today, addresses the nation, that's essentially what this was. I think it's noteworthy, and I think it demands to be discussed, but I do think we're going to deepen our understanding of this. This show's going to talk to people on both sides of this argument, like it or not. We're going to talk to the separatists. We're going to talk to the organizers. We're going to have meaningful conversations with them. We're going to throw fastballs and curveballs, and we're going to give them a chance to have their say, and we're going to give you a chance to have your say as well, to talk at RyanJespersen.com.
I just want to know what Carney's like. Like, does he have really good bedroom talk or something? Because everyone's very agreeable with him out of the gates here. Like, Danielle Smith is agreeable with him. Trump is agreeable with him. These were all the people we thought he would be at odds with, who we would be taking up arms and getting in these huge debates and arguments and wars with. And it all seems to be very calm.
But if you think about it,
it's eerily calm. Right?
Until 4 months ago, he wasn't a politician.
True.
Right? He was a deal maker, an executive, a high-profile board member, governor of two nations' banks.
Bit of a negotiator. Before you go, I know we're done here, but I know you wanted to reference this banger of a picture.
I just thought this was funny. As we wrap, this is just, I know that this picture is making the rounds. It just made me laugh. This was a photo, for those of you listening on the podcast, a photo spotted at the Toronto Marathon. A man, by the way, who looks like Mr. Beast. Don't you think he looks like Mr. Beast? Holding a sign that says, if you lose today's race, just run again in Alberta. I thought that was pretty good from somebody watching and cheering on participants at the Toronto Marathon. Coming up on the next couple of episodes, I mean, we've got you covered, and we're taking on issues that matter. This one, of course, our conversation about Albertans and Canadians living with disabilities tomorrow, auto insurance reform. What do folks actually want? Then we're going to talk about the health of our cities, including downtowns. What is happening with the markets, and how is our conflict, the economic dust-up with the Americans, impacting that? That's all on the 7th of May. The 8th of May, the Premier, Danielle Smith, and an Edmonton Film Roundtable. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out RyanJespersen.com.